Hi, you guys there? Just getting in the mood. All right, so I don't do this very often, so you guys are going to have to tell me if I am coming through okay. So, can you hear me? Is it really quiet? How is the sound? All right. Hi, everybody. So, how's everybody been? Are we all ready to go out and vote, those of us who can, and all that? Cool. I'm going to go just assume that everybody who can is going to. All right. I've decided to try to do more vlog style types of things because even though I don't consider myself very good at them, I have this huge backlog of videos that I want to do, and I never get to them because it takes so long to do them, to sort of put a whole video together and do all the scripting and the editing and the audio. So I just said, well, let's try this. So thank you for being here on the first trial run of something that was really bugging me, and I wanted to get it out. So now I don't know if who here has maybe heard of the book Kill All Normies or Zero Books or Angela Nagle. She is she's a socialist, a leftist, and she has some opinions on identity politics and feminism that I thought might be interesting for us to go through. So let's see. She was in I'm going to pull up, and hat tip to the Twitter person Zainab. I used to work with someone named Zainab, so I'm going to assume that that's the same kind of thing. So let me pull up what she put out there. All right, so give me a sec. And I will try to let us just see. Nope, that's not the thing. All right, let's see. Tell me if you can hear this. All right, so can anybody hear that? Barely. All right, I'll try turning it up, and if you can hear it, that would be cool. What am I doing? Nope, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Because I was in the wrong screen. Hi. Doesn't this perfectly describe the strange sexual politics of the social justice warrior feminist classical liberals? How about that? Does that work? I can't hear it now, but if you can, that's fine. All right. All right, so what I can do is go over to here and read you. Someone was on this delightful stupid ID poll, stupid poll, the Thinking Socialists page here. Someone was nice enough to write down what she's saying here. All right, so she's arguing. Classical liberals also mischaracterize the social justice warrior identitarian left as Marxist. I'd argue it's actually a product of liberalism itself. It's a kind of inevitable result of liberalism. France's Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen in 1789 read, "Liberty consists in the freedom to do everything which injures no one else." Doesn't this perfectly describe the strange sexual politics of the social justice warrior feminism that classical liberals dislike so much? It's the ultimate expression of individual self-actualization with its fixation on niche personalized identities and tastes, but more importantly, it holds only the harm principle or consent as the sole moral category to consider in terms of in matters of sexual morality. So, on questions of abortion, on prostitution, on pornography, and so on, all is good. But even a hand on the knee without consent today is treated almost as if it's assault. It seems a strange thing for these two to coexist. Is it Puritanism or is it sexual liberation? I think it only makes sense when you see that idea of liberty is actually central to it. The project of this new style of feminism is to resolve the old conflict between pro-sexual revolution feminists and those who were highly critical of the sexual revolution, of pornography, prostitution, and so on by allowing absolute sexual freedom but an extremely strict code when it comes to consent. Again, liberty consists in the freedom to do everything that harms no one else. So I read that, which I'm sure was a lot of fun for you guys. Let me put it off screen share now. All right. And I want to talk about a few of the thoughts I have on that. And later on, she goes on to sort of discuss with Carl, sort of in a more one-on-one casual way, about how maybe they could go back to when labor was more socially conservative, which I'm sure we all think would be great and awesome, except not at all. And she's talked about this a few times, but let me I'm just going to discuss my perspective on it. It may not be anybody else's perspective on it, but I think it's worth discussing. So first of all, I don't think that there is one leftist conception or one feminist conception of sexual morality, right? And I think that's good. Like, I don't think that there needs to be. What I think is that we should be able to make the distinctions that she's not making here between individual sexual ethics and morality and things that we would legislate. So if I'm talking about the things that I think about in terms of morality and sex, which may or may not be what other people are talking about, you know, I kind of tend to think about it as the same way I think about other questions that might touch on these things. So I would think about, am I being honest or responsible? Am I being kind? Am I, you know, making sure that everybody here, hey, am I thinking of them in a humanist way? the same way that I like to think about people, and not as means to an end, but as whole individual people who have rights, who should be treated with respect and decency. These are the kinds of things that I think about, in as much as I'm, when I'm getting down to it, I'm thinking about that kind of stuff, which is, um, I don't know, thinking, that's not my major, um, that's not really what you're trying to do in these situations. You hopefully have been doing the thinking beforehand. Um, but uh, that doesn't mean that all of that stuff that goes into it is anything that I would consider being a good thing to make policies about or to legislate about. Um, because I don't think that that is, I frequently say that this sort of individualist versus collectivist thing is just some sort of garbage, reductionist bullshit that's a false dichotomy that people came up with, right? Um, and here is one example where I think, yeah, this would be a good place to not be overly collectivist, but to consider individual rights and freedoms and interests, as long as they aren't, um, going over the harm principle, as long as they aren't hurting people, doing things against people's wills and rights, and et cetera, et cetera. Because that is sort of the one area where you would sort of kind of go, we need to, this isn't okay. In our society, we don't coerce people, we don't force people to do things. Um, mm. And obviously, that she has a strange. I can understand having concerns about sex work under the capitalist world that we're living in, right? Like, there are so many possibilities for abuse, but my assumption is that under socialism, there's still going to be different kinds of sex work, or at the very least, what we would call pornography, um, which is a form of art and expression and is perfectly healthy. And there's nothing in me that's going to tell people, even if, let's say, I'm a person who would never, ever do that myself because I'm totally against that for whatever reason. It doesn't matter what the reason would be, right? That doesn't mean I'm going to stop anybody else from doing it. And that doesn't mean that there's anything inherently wrong with it or that should be judged about it. Different people can be different about these kinds of issues, and everything can be cool. Like, if I'm going to tell you now, I would suggest to people, because I think I've watched porn, just me. I'm sure I'm the only one here. But you've probably heard about it, read magazine articles, have met people who have seen pornographic material before. And I think we can all, just go with me that I'm not the only one in the whole world. Okay. Uh, I would recommend to people that they consider where their porn has been made. I would consider whether or not there are unions. There are sex worker unions, and I think that if you look into um, the people who are in these unions and what they've produced, and are you paying for your porn? Are you getting it offline? Are you getting it in a place where they've basically been not treating workers well? Because there's plenty of places like that where people aren't treated well, where things aren't always voluntary. And that is a concern. Consent is a key concern when you're looking at things socially and politically, right? I know, people. I am shocked. I was shocked too to find out these things even existed. My stars. But I think that there's a big difference between between sexual morality that comes from a place of Puritanism. And, this seems to be part of her confusion when she talks about, is this Puritanism? Is this. No, Puritans were not concerned with consent. Like, that wasn't their problem. And no, it isn't. If you start from a basis, ethically speaking, right, of sex is a bad thing. Sex is suspect. Sex is of the devil. Demons. Horrors. No. Get that sex away from me because it's so bad. Then yeah, that's going to poison and taint whatever politics or whatever ethical systems are going to come out of that, right? Um, But if you start from a position that sex is a good thing, it's a healthy, natural, perfectly, at its heart of hearts, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all good. You know, sex is a good thing. Then you don't get, um, and she'll say things about like perversion or, um, what she's talking about, niche kinks, and I don't care. Like, who the fuck cares about that sort of thing? Like, uh, do what you want. I don't consider, um, right. So, like, I don't consider, let's say, I don't like red peppers. Red and green peppers kind of like they're yucky to me. But if you were to eat a green pepper and say this was good to you, I wouldn't call you a pervert. Like some of these things really are just matters of taste, and that's all right. Like we don't have to worry about that sort of thing. Ugh. And certainly some of the things that she's talking about with abortion are not good. Like, it's not good that this is getting, oh, abortion and prostitution and, and pornography. Oh my. Like, all these things are being wrapped up. These are sort of bugaboos of sexuality that people have had. And what is the point of having them in a leftist field? Right? So I don't know. I'm very, very unconvinced by many of her arguments. And the thing is, this is a socialist person, a leftist person. And she's coming from this, and this is sort of an attack upon identity politics and social justice. And so you can see the issue here is that these people aren't against identity politics. They're against a certain slant to it. They're against abortion. Like, are you going to tell me that you hate identity politics, but you want anti-abortion, pro-life, anti-pornography, these sorts of things? And I don't think she's ever completely blatant about what exactly she means when she says we could have labor but socially conservative. Yay, but when you look at some of the things that she's talking about, when labor was socially conservative, it wasn't Like, I can show you people saying things like, we all know that queer and trans stuff comes from bourgeois, politics. Like, no, no, it just comes from being queer or trans. Like, it's not this thing. But there were people based on their particular prejudices who assumed that it was an unnatural and unhealthy thing, and therefore capitalism must cause it. Like, because that's the source of all the unnatural, unhealthy things that we should all fight against. So that's one of my issues, and I just really didn't like letting it stand. Like, I don't like this idea that leftists would go and hang out with Sargon of Akkad and have a long discussion about the problem of my having bodily autonomy. Like, and what shall we do? Yeah, an actual joke. I was just giving an example of, if she's referencing, this is what we could go back to the labor movement when it was socially conservative. That was one of the things that that the socially conservative labor movement came up with, but it's not specific, and it's not specific that that's what she's talking about. Like, she never exactly says what she's talking about, and that becomes kind of a problem. So let's look more, because let's say, I'm going to screen share again. So watch out. Hello. Come on. Work. I demand you work. So this is her talking more about one of the things that she likes to talk about, which is trolls and transgressive, the politics of transgression. So transgression has been embraced as a virtue within Western social liberalism ever since the 60s. Now, you notice again, it's always about liberalism. It's not like there's any leftist arguments or anarchist arguments, socialist arguments that could be used for this sort of thing. No, 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 no. So let's see. I'm gonna, and she starts out by talking about how the art world has been harmed, apparently, by this virtue of transgression. Let's see. Those who claim that the new right-wing sensibility online today is just more of the same old right, undeserving of attention or differentiation, are wrong. I know of no one who has ever said that. Like, I would love to see the people who say that thing, but that's okay. Although it is constantly changing, in this important early stage of its appeal, its ability to assume the aesthetics of counterculture, transgression, and nonconformity tells us many things about the nature of its appeal and about the liberal establishment it defines itself against. It has more in common with the 1968 left slogan, "It is forbidden to forbid," than it does with anything most recognized as part of any traditionalist right. Instead of interpreting it as a part of other right-wing movements, conservative or libertarian, I would argue that the style being channeled by Pepe meme posting trolls and online transgressives belongs to a tradition that can be traced from the 18th century writings of the Marquis de Sade, Surviving through to the 19th century Parisian avant-garde, the Surrealists, the rebel rejection of feminized conformity of post-war America, and then what film critics called 1990s male rampage films like American Psycho and Fight Club. In these, as in the rightist Chan culture, interpretation and judgment are evaded through tricks and layers of metatextual self-awareness and irony. So, one of the first things that I notice here is that when she talks about transgression, um, she talks about forms that have been done by men, right? And I find this it's very odd to me, okay? So, um, starting out, and she brings up the Marquis de Sade a lot. And the thing that sort of really rubs me the wrong way is the way that she brings up the Marquis de Sade, which, oh, good Lord. It's one thing to say that his writings should be read or could be read today, or that he sort of started erotica as even that I think is pretty much a stretch. I don't think he started transgression. I don't think he started eroticism. I think he was a very rich man who was a rapist and openly, and who hurt sex workers, like, and used his power to beat and torture women. And we have to be kind of careful about not making that into something better than it is. Like, yeah, he also wrote good, and he had sort of a inspiration to many other kinds of artists who were sort of looking at this idea of transgression and going outside of the culture. But that doesn't mean that we should take someone who was basically a pedophile who raped working class women and sex workers and people like that because he had this class of being a marquis that was beyond them, like, and he could get away with that. Because nobody gave a shit, right? Um, and he spent some time in jail for it, and he deserved to spend some time in jail for it, uh, because every time he got out, he would just hurt people again. He beat his wife. He was just not a good person, right? Like, a lot of times I don't know what she's talking about when she's going on and on about transgression. Like, if I was going to say, all right, so this transgressive impulse started from the Marquis de Sade, that doesn't make it a good class-based kind of thing, right? Like, if I'm a socialist, if I'm interested in labor movements, if I'm interested in class, this does not seem like somebody I'm going to talk about a lot in a good way. At the very least, I'm going to make damn sure I bring that stuff up. Like, that's not cool. I don't know. So then she's going through the rejection of feminized conformity, male rampage films, American Psycho, and Fight Club. And again, it's all this framing of these transgressive impulses in art as being a masculine thing that's against feminine things, and that's not accurate. Like, because it was just as common to see um, it in the reverse. I mean, there were a lot of examples of female artists, female or gay or queer or gender non-conforming, transgressive artists. Like if I were to start a talking about where these kinds of things came from, I'm sure that my list would include David Bowie, and it would include, all sorts of other people. It would include Billie Holiday, like they're singing Strange Fruit. These would be examples that I would use. And she's choosing a different set of examples, and I think that we can think about why she's choosing them and why maybe she's so sympathetic to Jordan Peterson, why she's sympathetic to Sargon of Akkad and sympathetic to Gamergate. She kind of accepts a lot of their own narrative about what they're about and where they come from. Right? So, she also sees transgression and counterculture as being this sort of almost whole, entirely amoral thing. And that is where she sort of gets into trouble. Another place where she sort of gets into trouble. And I'm sorry, I can't see the chat because I'm showing this. So if people are coming up with really great points, I hope you are. And I'm sorry, I can't read them. Let's see. Da, 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 da. She talks about Nietzsche about a bit. Perhaps the most significant theorist of transgression, George Bataille, inherited his idea of sovereignty from de Sade, stressing self-determination over obedience. Although rightist chant culture was undoubtedly not what he had in mind, the politically fungible ideas and styles of these aesthetic transgressives are echoed in the porn-fueled, shocking content of early B and in the later anti-liberal transgressions of the later pole. Bataille revered transgression in and of itself, and like de Sade, viewed non-procreative sex as an expression of the sovereign against instrumentalism, what he called expenditure without reserve. For him, excessive behavior without purpose, which also characterizes the sensibility of contemporary meme culture, in which enormous human effort is exerted with no obvious personal benefit, was paradigmatically transgressive in an age of Protestant instrumental rationality. I find that an interesting take. Let's see. Let's go back. I want to talk about this idea of the Carnivalesque, because I think that this highlights one of the issues with her way of thinking about these things. So, in the politics and poetics of transgression, Stalybras and White consider the Carnivalesque to be a form of radical transgression against hierarchy and hegemony. The grotesque tends to operate as a critique of dominant ideology, which has already set the terms designating what is high and low. This is very much how 4chan has long self-described, and how it was described by its early progressive boosters, except that the dominant ideology in the time of 4chan has been cultural liberalism. The low therefore meant un-PC, poor taste, rudeness, shock, offense, and trolling. The Carnivalesque was also theorized by Bakhtin, whose ideologically flexible and ambivalent definition sounds like much of some of the self-descriptions of trolls on what trolling is doing. Carnival laughter is the laughter of all the people. Second, it is universal in scope. It is directed at all and everyone, including the carnival's participants. The entire world is seen in its droll aspect, in its gay relativity. Third, this laughter is ambivalent. It is gay, triumphant, and at the same time mocking and deriding. If you think that that is an accurate all the people, all the people are involved in 4chan. Like, yeah, we're all in there together. Like, they don't have very specific ideological targets and very specific people that don't get criticized. Like, no, it's not. No, I find that shocking. And immediately when I see that, I'm like, yeah, all right, sure, girl, whatever. Mm, sorry. You guys probably thought you were coming to a really fun stream where we talk about sex and stuff, and now we're going to talk about, this instead. Um, so now she's going to talk about feminism's relationship to the cultural politics of transgression, which she considers complicated. Um, In the battle over Roe v. Wade and Phyllis Schlafly's war on the Equal Rights Amendment, feminism was very much on the side of the transgressive tradition of Desaad, as it sought to destroy moralism and free the id. No. Like, that was not what it was trying to do. God. Oh my God. Anyway. However, for some feminists, the id of their transgressive male peers proved a little too free. Criticisms of the inequities of free love and the hypocrisies and inequalities experienced by women in anti-war and other activist movements in the 60s and 70s started to emerge from feminist writing as a kind of critique of the counterculture. The pornified culture, produced by the sexual revolution, soon came under its harshest criticisms from feminists like Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon by the 80s, and soon the war on porn feminists even aligned with conservatives. Let's see. During the recent online culture wars and their spillover into campus and protest politics, feminists have tried to embrace transgression with the slut walk movement and sex positive, pro-trans, pro-sex worker, and pro-kink culture that was central to Tumblr. No. Bad Nagle. All right, I'm going to try to actually explain why that's bad. It really minimizes a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? Like, being pro-trans is not central to Tumblr. Like, that's not the... I'm not sure. I was never on Tumblr. Maybe these things were important on Tumblr, whatever. But that's not where it all comes from, right? That's not why it's important. It doesn't matter that it was important on Tumblr. What matters is that these are the bases of our morality. This is where our morals stem from and what they're about when you're a humanist, a feminist, egalitarian. You want to be all these things. You want to be sex positive and pro-trans and pro-sex worker and pro-kink culture that, embraces consent. So I'm going to go on and read some more. However, like the right, it is run up against a deep philosophical problem about the ideologically flexible, politically fungible, morally neutral nature of transgression as a style, which can characterize misogyny just as easily as it can sexual liberation. As Losh understood for progressive politics, anti-moral transgression has always been a bargain with the devil because the case for equality is essentially a moral one. So, all right, I'm going to go back to talking to you guys on the chat for a bit. So hang on. Hello, can you unscreen share? Okay, you should be back. It was. Let's see. I'm going through and reading some of you guys' stuff. There's a lot of people talking about me cherry picking. I don't know. Or is that who's cherry picking? Yes, Nagle is not a historian. She literally takes a lot of things directly out of Wikipedia or directly out of Rational Wiki and puts them in books. And those books sell a lot, so that's good. They're not word for word. You can sort of compare them, and they're, a few words have been changed here and there. So very frustrating. Very frustrating attitude that she has. And I kind of wanted to, oh, hi, some random geek. You're busy cooking? That's okay. I have a lot of trouble with this sort of strain of leftism. I have difficulty with it, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is how, I'm going to talk about one more article. She has a conversation with Laura Kipnis, who friends of this channel will know I'm not a big fan of, right? And she talks a lot about Me Too, and I want to just read this sort of this thing that she talks about. So let me screen share again. This is the last time, though. So, Angela, it should go without saying that genuine sexual predators being brought into the light is a great thing, but Me Too has quickly become something very ugly. So glad she's there with that radical take. The chaos of the present moment in America is that the world of dating and romance has become sexualized to a point of being cold and calculating, where all sexual taboos have been broken down, but very normal and healthy forms of sexual expression, like flirting and seduction, are treated as sinister. Young feminists are trying to keep the sexual revolution going on some things like abortion and prostitution, while simultaneously imposing ever stricter penalties for behaviors like unwanted touching. Those aren't contradictory. Just gonna say, not a contradiction. Anyway, we now suspect everyone else of sexual perversion while celebrating all of the things that were considered sexual perversions before the sexual revolution. I'm not sure what she means by that. I guess she must mean that we suspect everybody of being predators, but I don't think that that's true. It's an attempt to redraw a new code of etiquette that I think will lead to further atomization, loneliness, and social distrust. I think it's nothing short of a social disaster, quite honestly, and it's a war on all the things that are intuitive and sensual and therefore blurry and messy about romance and sex. We've all heard this argument before, right? Human interactions are complex, unspoken negotiation and always will be. We all need to be hugging and kissing and touching each other more, if anything, without consent forms, one would hope. The more vocal Italian and French rejection of Me Too was great because it was too flirtatious and affectionate cultures rejecting American cultural imperialism, bulldozing all other cultures via liberal social media culture. There are many great things about America, but I do wish this antisocial mania could be contained. So many things wrong about that, right? Like I could I could write a dissertation on all the things that I find wrong with that. And one of the things that I find interesting is Kipnis, who, as I understand it, is no great leftist, and she's not a great. She is a feminist, but she's not a great feminist, right? Um, but she's the one that sort of. It's shocking to me that she would be the one to sort of point out some obvious flaws here. Um, so she says, I think it actually does need saying that if we all need to be hugging and kissing more, the hugging and kissing needs to be voluntary. What's been most valuable about Me Too has been the tranche of revelations that fall in between predators like Weinstein and the people ragging about bad dates, about just how normalized workplace harassment of the ugliest sort has been. What seems silly to me about the Deneuve letter, though I know she wasn't the author, was the ease in which it eluded such realities. Not just the upper echelons, like a pundit rubbing his erections on random job seekers, but the hotel housekeepers and fast food workers for whom the right to bother, if I recall the wording of the Deneuve letter correctly, is nothing but business as usual. So, to me, that is the most obvious problem um, for any leftist, is that if you're there talking about how it makes me kind of angry. So, um, all right. So I'm back, but I am very angry. Like, we are seeing so many people. We have seen Google strikes, we have seen food workers striking, and this particular strain of leftism is not in favor of them because they're too identity politics for them, right? The wine glass is a big mood. Yes, it is. Sorry. And so that means that they're not in the place of being on the side of workers today. They're not in the place of being on the side of labor and on unions and on people that are striking, because a lot of the reasons that the labor um, movement is moving forward is because, yeah, people are women workers don't want to be considered a perk. Like, they don't want, they want to go in and do their job, and they don't want to be harassed. And people of color want to go in and do their job and not have to deal with this shit. And trans people don't want to be told that they can't, uh, they can be discriminated against and it doesn't matter. And these are the things that are coming up over and over again in American politics, certainly. And I'm pretty sure not just American politics, it's not just us. And I think that that is just total bullshit. So it's like this formation of leftist, socialist, pro-worker stuff just removes entire huge swaths of the actual workers in the world. It just removes their agency, their desire, what's important to them, what they care about. It just like it doesn't even matter because I don't know, she has this 18th century idea of what a worker is that's like a miner. Like there are miners today, but that's not the labor of today. The labor movement of today has to be intersectional because that's what labor is, you know? Um all right. So I'm so glad you guys let me get that rant off my chest. Yes, they were uh, Angela Nagle's "Kill All Normies," which is kind of I'm trying to think of the best possible way to say this, and I don't know how to say this nicely, but I feel like it was apologism for certain right wing antisocial bullshit. It sort of took it at face value, took it at based on what it would like to say. I mean, today we had yet another example of a man going in and shooting people, shooting two women, killing two women, and shooting, I believe, five other people. This was in Tallahassee, Florida, because women are evil, and just out of pure hatred. Hi, President Parakeet. So that really frustrated me. It frustrates me that there are people still making this absurd argument that this is all just trolling and this is just sort of this theatrical transgression that doesn't have a real world implication. Just like with her best, the person that she's always talking about, Marquis de Sade, it does have a real world corollary. Yeah, I think King John Targaryen, you've got it exactly right, which, yeah, it is apologist nonsense for sure. And again, it's always about protecting these poor little white boys. Um, and yes, Nagel also frequently defends Sargon as as being against racism and somebody who's all you know how he is. He's like always out there on the front lines against the alt right. That's what it is. Uh, so so that was I didn't consider how I would sort of end this. Does anybody have any questions or anything for me? Because now I'm like, I've gotten it all out, and I'm like, oh, thank God I got this all out because this was bugging me. I was upset about it. Because, I'm upset about it not because Angela Nagel, I'm not upset because she's there and she exists, whatever. Um, I'm upset because that there is a strain of leftism that she represents. I showed you that I do allow DMs on Twitter. But like you have to ask if I'm not following you and you're not following me, there's that thing. But there is, as I showed you, that stupid poll. Oh yeah, Kill All Normies sold very well. And it was well liked. Like it was liked by Richard Spencer openly. It was liked by the sort of people you would not think that a leftist would want to be liked by. Um, So, yeah, libertarian Linus rant. Can I ask a question for a completely different topic? Sure, go for it. I'll I'll be there. When it comes up in my feed, I'll see it. No doubt. Will there be a next Rocky analysis? Yes. Um, it was taken down. I appealed it. The appeal was not successful, which means I have to go back and play with that. Like I've got to figure that out, how that's going to work. So what I'm going to probably do is split it up into chunks and muck about with that and then get it all out there. I'm also working on the follow-up to the Kavanaugh, um, the top 20 gaslighters of the Kavanaugh era. And that's tricky because with the way that the news is going today, things are moving so very quickly that things like Kavanaugh being put on the Supreme Court, which will affect people for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, right? Um, but the news is so fast and so quick, and it just comes so like one thing after another. We don't have time to really process what's going on. We don't have time to think about it, and we don't have time to sort of analyze in a larger sense what is going on. So that's why I really wanted to do a deep dive into this concept of gaslighting and how politicians and the media can come forward and really gaslight the entire American public, right? Um, and how does that work? And like, what do they do specifically? Um, and what are the tactics and what are the arguments so that people can keep their eye out for it so that we have this sort of meta knowledge, if that makes sense. I just made that fucking thing up. Like, I'm sure that there's a better word for it than meta knowledge. Okay, I'm sorry I said that. It's fine. Moving on. But so that we can have this way of sort of top down analyzing, oh, that's what's happening now. This is what they're doing. They're taking the same tactic and they're applying it to this situation and this situation. And at the same time, being able to take a breath and to think about the things that are done in any political country, in any country, in a large scale political way. They have this effect. They have an exponential effect. They have an effect over time. And we have to be able to think about what that is, right? So that those are the two things that I'm working on, even though I kind of assume that not a lot of people are going to watch the Kavanaugh thing because we are onto something new, and it is extremely difficult even just to keep up with it. It is not just you, King John. Right wingers have a fascination with the character of Tyler Durden. And that's ridiculous because he was sort of this was a takedown of toxic masculinity, and instead, some people seem to find it a blueprint. So, all right. Well, that's cool. Is there, I'll take, I'll stay on for 5 more minutes. So if anybody has any other questions, you got 5 minutes, and then I'll assume that we're all good. Um, and meta knowledge. Yeah, it's my tag now. Mm, there were racists who really enjoyed American history. Yes, there sure were. Yeah, it is. It's distressing that that when you try to put a satire together or something that is critical of something, um, you got to do it really well, or else they're just going to take it at face value and go, "Yay, this is us," you know. So, Lindsay Ellis did a fantastic video on that um, some time ago, where she talked about how there is a reason why, you know, Mel Brooks's stuff doesn't get enjoyed by Nazis, but other um, other groups. And I think that you can take that to like Kekistan too. Supposedly, Kekistan and the Kekistan flag were meant to be satirical of the Nazis, but you know, it turns out that green is not a great satirical point. Like just taking the flag and going, now it's green. Like, huh? Are you feeling owned yet? Like, no, that's not good. And they threw keck in there, which meant laugh, as in I'm gonna laugh at you, but it's not exactly a trenchant satirical point. And if you're not gonna do that, like if you're not really gonna bear down on it, like actually go in and and satirize the Nazis, then what are you doing? It's not a satire. It's just green. That's all that it is. You just made it green. Ugh. Yes, bear down for the midterms. Garrett is absolutely right there. I think it is vote.org. If there's anyone, I'm assuming that most of the people here are going to vote if they can, if they haven't already. I certainly am. I have made sure quite some time ago that I was all set that way. Like, I don't want any surprises, but I do believe that even if you came in and suddenly found out that, oopsie daisy, we seem to have lost your registration because that's a thing now in our great democracy that we have, you could just be dropped up the rolls and never know about it. Um, but I believe that you can sort of ask for a preliminary ballot or sort of a provisional ballot, and they have to give that to you. So I think got 2 more minutes. So any other questions? Yeah, did YouTube delete the Tallahassee Shooters channel? Ugh. Probably exists somewhere. Crazy. Friggin'. Sorry. I just said an ableist thing, which was terrible. It was just because I was angry. And I'm sorry. Cheers to you, Wilfing Maniac. Gasp, Chrissy makes a mistake. I make mistakes very, very frequently. Saw a feminist critic of Blade Runner 2049. I'm not sure what you're asking. Oh, is Saw? I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. I haven't seen Blade Runner 2049. Did the person who called in the Milwaukee bomb threat get busted? No. Nope. Yeah, we do all make mistakes. I'm all right with that. Thoughts on Contra's new video? My biggest thought is that I feel like I need to stay in my own lane, and I think that that's okay because I think that this was sort of a much. She was talking to trans women and to non-binary people and to people of different sort of genders in such a way that I really think that it was more of an internal conversation. And yeah, I think sometimes you have to be. I did watch it, I appreciated it, but I felt like um, just as I feel like watching sometimes people of color talk about sort of their intercultural disputes or discussions where I just feel like I don't have anything that I need to say. This isn't my um, this ain't my this isn't my place, you know, and that's cool. I think it's all right, you know, for people. I don't think I should center my opinion in there. What alcohol drink should I be drinking? What do you have on hand? Just put it in a glass, and that's what you should have. um, I don't drink a lot of hard liquor. I stick to wine nowadays most of the time, as long as it doesn't have tequila, because that kills me every freaking time. So, and on that note, I'm going to say cheers and good night to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Um, I'd love to hear the comments if you thought that this worked as a way to sort of get out more content, or if this just is not your sort of cup of tea, or um, or ways that maybe I can improve on this. I'm sure I could get better lighting and a better camera than whatever I have going on right now, which is like nothing. So, but good night. Thank you. Love you all. And make sure to vote. Bye.